started the way quiet storms do, without warning, but not without weight. A Wednesday night in mid-January, Toledo's streets lay still like an old song on low volume. Most of the shops were dark. Street lamps buzzed like distant memories. Somewhere in the distance, a late-night radio played a jazz tune Adrienne hadn't heard in years. Soft saxophone, steady drums. It reminded her of home, or maybe a version of home that lived only in memory. She drove alone. A government-issued black SUV, clean and unassuming, windows slightly tinted. Nothing flashy, nothing loud, just like her. Lieutenant Colonel Adrienne Wallace wasn't rushing. She wasn't drifting. She wasn't lost. She was on her way home. Have you ever watched someone carry themselves like the world had tried to knock them down, but they stayed upright anyway? Her fingers tapped softly against the steering wheel, not to the beat of the music, but to the rhythm of the road. There was something meditative about highway miles after midnight, something that made the uniform in the back seat feel heavier. Not in burden, in memory, in meaning. It had been a long day. Meetings, decisions, updates, debriefs. The kind of day that asked more than it gave. But this drive, this quiet stretch between duty and sleep, it was hers, until she saw the lights, flashing behind her, blue, then red. No siren, just light and pressure. Adrienne blinked once, slowed, pulled over. No panic, no protest, just a quiet breath and a thought. What did I do? She hadn't been speeding, not even close. The lines of the road were still where they belonged, and so was she. But some nights the rules shift. She looked in the rearview mirror and saw him step out, tall, broad, impatient. One hand on his holster, the other gripping a flashlight like it held the truth. No greeting, no courtesy, just license and registration. The jazz was still playing, just barely audible now. Muffled by the moment, Adrienne kept her hands visible, rolled the window down halfway. "Officer," she said, calm as still water. "May I ask why I'm being stopped?" He squinted, shined the light straight into her face like he was trying to search for something more than an answer. "You were drifting," he said flatly. "Didn't signal. Looked like you might be under the influence." Adrienne didn't argue. She just exhaled through her nose and reached, slowly, deliberately, for her documents. She had been through war zones quieter than this. Have you ever met someone who mistook silence for weakness? As she handed over her ID, she added, "This is a government vehicle. I'm a federal employee." He glanced at the badge. "Military?" he asked. "Yes." Then he smirked. "Small? Sharp. Doesn't mean you're above the law." Her face didn't move, but inside, something old stirred. It wasn't fear. It was recognition. Recognition of a moment she'd trained for, advised others about, warned her younger soldiers would come without warning. The kind of moment where dignity becomes a decision. And out there on Reynolds Road, beneath the humming streetlights and the slow jazz on the radio, Adrienne made hers. The car door slammed with the kind of force that said more than words ever could. Adrienne saw it through the side mirror. Tall frame, squared shoulders, hand already resting on his holster, like it belonged there more than it ever belonged to peace. The flashlight in his other hand bobbed slightly as he walked, casting sharp slashes of light across her rear window, then her license plate, then her face. The jazz on the radio faded into silence. Adrienne kept her posture straight, calm hands, still voice. She had trained for conflict, not chaos, and there was a difference. He didn't come to the passenger side, didn't circle the vehicle or even glance at the plates. He came straight to her window. No good evening, no ma'am, just license and registration. The flashlight stayed fixed on her eyes, not looking for answers, looking for submission. She kept her tone level. "Officer, may I ask the reason for the stop?" He blinked, then tilted the light higher, deliberately. "You were drifting between lanes, didn't use your signal, looked like you might have been drinking." There was a pause. The kind that makes the air between two people shift, just enough for instinct to step in. Adrienne's first thought wasn't anger, it was assessment. He's already decided who I am. You ever see someone enter a room already looking for a fight? She moved slowly, deliberately, reached for the glove box with hands that had once guided convoys across mountain passes, retrieved her documents the same way she'd handled briefing folders in war zones. Precision without provocation. "This is a government vehicle," she said softly. "I'm a federal employee." He glanced at the ID but didn't really read it. Just skimmed it like it was an inconvenience, not an identification. Military? He asked. Yes. That word landed with no weight on him. His lips curled slightly into a smirk. Doesn't mean you're above the law. Adrian met his eyes, still calm, still steady. I never said I was. But something shifted in him. You could feel it. His stance widened, his voice sharpened. Step out of the vehicle. She blinked. Excuse me? I said step out of the car. I'm conducting a sobriety check. Adrian's grip tightened just slightly on the steering wheel. There was no slur in her speech, no unsteadiness in her hands, no trace of alcohol anywhere near her body. What she did have, what she always had, was her composure and her questions. On what grounds? She asked, voice still even. I've complied. I haven't been drinking. A moment of tension passed between them, electric and unspoken. I need you to exit the vehicle, he repeated, louder now. No explanation, no reason, just volume and authority. Have you ever seen someone try to turn tone into truth? Adrian didn't move. Not out of defiance, but out of measure. No, she said quietly. I'm asking for clarification. That did it. Something flared in him. Maybe it was ego. Maybe it was power worn too tightly for too long. But he reached for her door handle without hesitation and pulled it open himself. That was when she reached for her phone. Not a weapon, not a shout, just the quiet press of a thumb on the camera app. The screen lit up. A red dot blinked to life. Just so we're clear, she said, steady as prayer, this interaction is being documented. The camera caught the flicker in his eyes. Just for a second. That moment when even the most practiced mask slips. Have you ever watched someone realize too late they might be seen? He didn't back away. Not yet. He repeated his order. Out of the car. Adrian stepped out, not with drama, not with fear, just quiet resolve. Even in civilian clothes, she carried herself with the discipline of decades. Shoulders square, voice silent, but presence undeniable. Mercer looked at her again, and for the first time, he paused. He didn't know what he was looking at, but something told him. She wasn't what he expected. Still, his ego was louder than his instincts. He led her through the field test like she was a teenager coming from a bar instead of a veteran coming from base. Made her walk the line, touch her nose, count, breathe. She passed, perfectly. No tremor, no slur, no falter. He still wrote her a citation, failure to maintain lane. Adrian took the paper without a word, just a look. A look that said, this isn't the end of the story, it's the beginning. And as she drove away, the jazz finally returned, soft again. But this time, the notes didn't soothe. They echoed. The station's fluorescent lights hummed overhead, pale and flickering, the kind of glow that made everything feel colder than it was. Sergeant Daniel Mercer walked in, tossed his keys onto the front desk with the same half-effort he gave most things that didn't carry weight in his world. The coffee he hadn't finished was still in the cup holder. The stop he just made was already fading from memory. Routine. That's what he told himself. Just another stop. He logged into the system, eyes half-lidded from a long shift. His report was brief. Failure to maintain lane. Possible signs of impairment, no arrest. The cursor blinked at the end of the sentence, like it was asking if that was really all there was. He didn't think twice. Have you ever seen someone mistake repetition for righteousness? Mercer unplugged his body cam and tossed it into the charging dock like it was just another brick in a wall he'd built over 15 years. A wall made of habit, of unchecked power, of silence. In the break room, the old vending machine buzzed as he leaned against the counter, bag of chips in hand, posture loose. 2 rookie officers were nearby, Diaz and Kennedy. Mercer liked an audience, especially the kind that hadn't yet figured out when to look away. Woman tried to pull rank on me tonight, he said, chuckling between chews. Flashed a government ID like it meant something. Attitude for days. Diaz looked up. Military? Mercer shrugged, said she was. Some Fed, didn't matter. But something flickered in Diaz's eyes. She didn't laugh, didn't smirk, just narrowed her gaze slightly. Did she say her name? She asked. Yeah, Mercer replied, tossing the empty bag in the trash. Wallace. Adrienne Wallace. Diaz paused. You ever hear silence slip to a room through the side door? She sat up straighter. Lieutenant Colonel Wallace? Mercer raised a brow. You know her? Diaz nodded slowly. She gave a lecture at the academy last year. Runs logistics out of Fort Wayne. Bronze Star. 2 deployments. She's the real deal. Mercer rolled his eyes. I don't care who she is. On the road, I'm the one making the calls. But the laugh didn't come this time. It stayed stuck somewhere in his chest. Sometimes, power isn't about how loud you speak, it's about who listens. Diaz didn't push, just picked up her folder and left the room, leaving Mercer alone with the hum of the vending machine and the quiet realization that maybe, just maybe, he hadn't clocked what he thought he had. Still, he didn't go back to check the footage, didn't think about her tone, her posture, the look in her eye when she took the citation. He had seen that look before, once, years ago. But back then, the man who gave it had walked away, and nothing had come of it. So Mercer filed it away in the drawer of things that won't matter tomorrow. But tomorrow had already begun, and somewhere down the hall, the light above the evidence room flickered. Just once, before going still. The morning light at Fort Wayne seeped through the blinds in long, golden slits, slicing across Adrienne's office like quiet reminders that the world keeps moving, even when your mind stays frozen in one moment. She hadn't slept, not from fear, not even from anger. It was something quieter than that. A low, persistent ache that sat behind her collarbone and didn't quite name itself. She watched the cursor blink on her screen. Blank email, blank subject line. But her mind was anything but blank. Have you ever replayed a conversation so many times, the silence between the words starts to speak? The memory of the flashing lights, the flashlight in her eyes, his hand near his holster. It all returned in fragments. Not like a nightmare, but like a recording she couldn't turn off. And through it all, the jazz from the night before still lingered faintly in her ears. A few notes looping in her head. Miles Davis, she thought. Or maybe Coltrane. She had played it in her car on the way home, hoping it would help her exhale. It didn't. She opened her drawer and pulled out a file. Light tan folder, government seal, her own name typed neatly at the top. Beneath it, another name now felt equally important, Mercer. She sat still for a long moment, then clicked the video file. The screen glowed soft blue. Her own voice echoed back at her. Just so we're clear, this interaction is being documented. Even now, hearing it felt strange, like watching someone else stand up in your body. Was that me? Was I really that calm? Have you ever watched yourself be brave and realized you didn't recognize the strength? A knock came at the door. Sergeant Daniels, her aide. He leaned in with a cautious look. You good, ma'am? Adrienne looked up. Her voice was steady, but something behind her eyes flickered. No, she said honestly, but I'm handling it. He stepped inside and shut the door behind him. I saw the footage, he said, lowering his voice. Do you want me to loop in the base attorney? She nodded once. Already done. Daniels hesitated. You sure you want to go through with this? Adrienne sat back in her chair, hands folded, jaw tight. I'm not looking for headlines, she said. I'm looking for accountability. That's all she had ever looked for. Not revenge, not retribution, just a line drawn clean enough for others to see. And maybe one day, follow. She thought of the younger soldiers she'd mentored. Fresh out of school, still learning how to balance respect with reality. She thought of every woman who had swallowed a slight to keep peace. Of every black woman who'd smiled to soften a room that didn't deserve her warmth. I've let too much go already, Adrienne whispered, more to herself than to him. Sometimes the silence weighs more than the fight. That afternoon, she made the call to JAG, then the office of the Inspector General, attached the video, filled out the complaint, step by step. No embellishment, no dramatics, just the truth, a slow, steady truth backed by 2 angles of video, 22 years of service, and a name that carried weight in rooms Mercer had never entered. She didn't slam the file when she closed it, didn't raise her voice when she sent the email. But the echo of that click, send, was louder than any shout. Outside her window, the sun had fully risen. The light landed on a framed photo on her desk, her first deployment. Dusty boots, quiet eyes. She stared at it a moment longer than usual. Then she turned back to work. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday. Plain. Manila. No warning label. Just a printed name, Sergeant Daniel Mercer, and the return address of Lucas County Civil Court. He tore it open, standing in the parking lot, keys still dangling from one hand, half a sandwich in the other. At first, he didn't read. He skimmed, like always. But this time, his eyes stopped mid-line. A name jumped out and hit harder than he expected. Lieutenant Colonel Adrienne Wallace. The paper felt heavier after that. He stood still for a moment, fingers curling slightly at the edge. The wind caught the corner, but he didn't let go. A civil rights complaint. Filed officially. Backed by evidence. Backed by someone who didn't flinch. Have you ever watched a man realize his world was no longer behind him, but in front of him, staring back? He laughed. Brief. Dry. No way this sticks, he muttered to himself, folding the paper once, twice, jamming it into his coat pocket like it could be buried that easily. But inside the station, things had shifted. The break room was quieter. The jokes didn't land. The sideways glances lingered longer than usual. His captain, Officer Dan Reading, called him in, closed the door, drew the blinds. "We need to talk." Mercer slumped into the chair like it was any other day. "Let me guess, she's trying to play victim now." Reading didn't smile. "She's not playing anything. Do you even know who she is?" "I don't care who she is," Mercer snapped. "She got pulled over, acted smug. I didn't kiss her shoes and now she's mad." The room went still. "You ever hear truth come in the form of silence?" Reading leaned forward. "She's not just some motorist. She's a lieutenant colonel. Bronze Star. 2 tours, one of the sharpest logistical minds in the region, and she's got the whole thing, 2 angles on tape." Mercer's jaw flexed. "So what, we roll over now because she wears more stripes than me?" "No," Reading said, voice flat. "But we don't pretend this is nothing either. You're going to court, and if this gets out, and it will, it's going to blow back hard." Still, Mercer's arrogance held, but something behind his eyes had begun to flicker. Doubt, maybe. Or something quieter, recognition. Across state lines, in a room lit by a desk lamp in late evening haze, Adrienne sat with her attorney. A woman named Delaney Price. Clear-eyed, measured, the kind of lawyer who didn't blink at intimidation. The file between them was thick, pages of transcripts, screen captures, official letters, everything documented, dated, deliberate. Delaney tapped a page. "You sure you want to do this in court? It'll be public. It'll follow you." Adrienne didn't look up right away. She was reading a small note tucked into her planner. A folded card from one of her former cadets. Faded now, ink smudged. It said, "You taught me to stand, even when I was shaking." She kept that note for days like this. "I'm not looking for fame," she finally said. "Let it follow me. I'm not the one who should be hiding." Delaney tilted her head. "Most people, they'd have let it go." Adrienne met her eyes. Calm, unmoved. "I've let too much go already." You ever meet someone who'd carried so much silence it became their armor? She wasn't preparing for battle. She was preparing for truth. The kind that doesn't shout, doesn't break things, doesn't burn bridges, just lays itself bare and waits to be seen. That night, Adrienne closed her laptop, turned off the light, and stood in front of her window. Outside, the base was quiet. The kind of stillness that lives between 2 storms. In her reflection, she could see both the woman she was and the one she refused to let the world forget. And in that reflection, a single ribbon on her uniform caught the moonlight and held it. The courtroom was colder than expected. Not because of the air conditioning, but because of the weight in the walls. Marble and silence, both pressed tight around the people inside. Everything echoed. Shoes on the tile, papers sliding across desks. Even breath seemed louder than it should have been. Adrienne stood just outside the double doors, smoothing the collar of her full-service uniform. Each ribbon had been placed with care. Each badge polished until it caught the light like memory. She could feel the eyes before she entered, but she didn't shrink. She stepped through the doors and walked down the aisle like she had walked into field briefings in war zones. Shoulders back, head level, not just present, but counted. Have you ever seen a room pause for someone who didn't ask it to? On one side of the courtroom, military officers from Fort Wayne, seated in quiet rows, some in uniform, some in suits, but all of them watching. On the other side, civilians, curious onlookers, a few local officers, some shifting in their seats. And Mercer. He sat stiffly, a gray suit pulled too tight across his shoulders. His hands were clasped, jaw clenched, the skin near his collar pink from heat or pressure, or maybe something deeper. Regret doesn't always look like sorrow. Sometimes it just looks like stillness. He didn't expect the uniform. Didn't expect the weight it carried when worn without apology. Adrienne took the stand. She didn't fumble, didn't rush. When Delaney Price, her lawyer, rose to speak, the courtroom leaned in. Not from drama, but from reverence. "Lieutenant Colonel Wallace," Delaney began, her voice clear, "can you describe the night of January 17th? Adrienne nodded once. I was driving back from a meeting at the Indiana Guard Reserve, she said softly. It was late, around 11:15. I was pulled over. There were no erratic maneuvers, no signs of intoxication. I complied. I asked reasonable questions. The officer responded with hostility. Each sentence landed like a steady drumbeat, no edge, just truth. I informed him I was a federal employee, that I was driving a government vehicle. He demanded I exit without reason. When I asked for clarification, he escalated. She paused. I turned on my phone and began recording. I had to. Have you ever needed proof for something you already knew would be dismissed? The courtroom stayed quiet. The judge took notes, glasses low on his nose. Delaney nodded. Did you ever resist? No. Did you ever raise your voice? No. Did you ever refuse a lawful order? I asked for clarity. That is not refusal. Then came the footage. First from her phone, then the body cam. Every frame told the story louder than any voice. Mercer's flashlight, his posture, the clipped tone, his hand hovering near his holster. Adrian's steady voice, the calm she held like a shield. The silence in the room was thick. Even the judge looked down for a moment, because sometimes the truth plays like a slow song, and no one dares interrupt. Then it was time for cross-examination. Mercer's attorney Breener approached with that careful cadence lawyers use when trying not to seem on the wrong side of history. Lieutenant Colonel Wallace, he began, is it possible that Sergeant Mercer was simply following protocol? Adrienne didn't blink. No. Is it possible he was concerned for your safety? I was driving within the lines, sober, respectful. The only danger present was his assumptions. Brenner nodded slowly. Then why record the stop? Adrienne looked at him. Not with anger, not with judgment, with clarity. Because silence is not protection. Because I've lived long enough to know that what is remembered isn't always what happened. Have you ever heard a truth that needed no defense? Brenner cleared his throat, stepped back. Then it was Mercer's turn. Not to speak, but to watch. Frame by frame, he saw himself through another lens, saw what power looks like when misused, especially when it thinks no one's watching. The prosecutor stepped forward. Sergeant Mercer, did she obey your commands? She questioned me. Is that illegal? He hesitated. No. Did she raise her voice? Threaten you? No. So why did you escalate? No answer. Were you aware she was a lieutenant colonel in the U.S. Army? Not at the time. And if you had known? Mercer looked down. His voice, for once small, I probably would have handled it differently. There it was. Not remorse, just calculation. The court saw it. The jury saw it. So did Adrienne. But she didn't flinch. She didn't gloat. She just breathed. Outside the windows, the afternoon sun had shifted. One beam broke through the blinds and landed on her nameplate at the witness stand. It glowed for a moment, quiet and clear. Like truth finally having a place to sit. 3 days passed. The courthouse was quieter now. No uniforms, no press. Just Adrienne, her attorney, and a few civilians with the look of those who'd stayed simply because something in them wouldn't let go. Mercer sat at the defense table, suit wrinkled, hands tight in his lap. His expression was blank, but something in the way his foot tapped betrayed him. Restless, caged. You ever seen a man wear stillness like a shield? Judge Cynthia Morales shuffled the papers gently. Her voice calm but resolute. In the matter of Wallace versus Mercer, she began, the jury has found in favor of the plaintiff. The words didn't rise like thunder. They landed like rain, soft but final. The court recognized a violation of constitutional rights. The citation was ruled unlawful, the detainment unjustified. Adrienne was awarded $35,000 in damages. But it was never about the number. Adrienne didn't smile. She didn't nod. She just breathed. One breath, steady and deep, like setting down a weight she'd carried longer than she realized. Have you ever seen justice walk in quietly, with no fanfare, only a sense of rightness that hums just beneath the skin? The ruling would be forwarded to the Department of Justice and the Toledo Police Department. Internal review. Policy evaluation. A ripple in the fabric Mercer had always believed was ironclad. Outside the courthouse, a few reporters lingered, microphones ready. Cameras blinking like eyes that had just awakened. Mercer exited through the side. He didn't speak. Just held a folder up to shield his face, the same way a child hides behind their hands, believing if they don't look at the world won't look back. Adrienne didn't chase headlines. She stayed behind, sitting on a bench in the hallway beneath a stained glass window. The colors poured onto the floor in soft blues and reds, touching the tips of her boots like blessing or memory. Her phone buzzed. Verdict in your favor. Case closed. Her lawyer caught up with her. You could have asked for more, she said gently. Adrienne shook her head. It was never about the money. Delaney looked at her for a long second. Do you think it'll change anything? Adrienne turned toward the glass doors, the afternoon light warming the brass trim on her uniform. I don't know, she said, but maybe next time he pulls someone over, he'll think twice. That was enough for now. Have you ever planted something knowing you may never see it bloom, but doing it anyway? A week later, Mercer was placed on administrative leave. Whispers floated through the precinct like dust in old sunlight. Some said reassignment, others said it was the beginning of the end. Either way, the silence around his name had cracked and people were listening now. At Fort Wayne, Adrienne returned to work. No interviews, no applause, just early mornings, mission plans, and young soldiers still learning how to stand. 2 months passed. She stood in front of a new class of recruits, fresh uniforms, bright eyes, hands that hadn't yet known the full weight of the world. She wasn't there to talk tactics or terrain. She was there to talk about something harder. Respect, she said, isn't owed, it's earned. A few heads tilted, a few brows furrowed. She smiled, but only faintly. Same goes for power. The badge, the rank, they're not shields, they're weights. And if you can't carry them with discipline, you don't deserve to carry them at all. Have you ever heard a truth so soft it echoed anyway? She paused, then added, slower this time. When I was stopped by someone who forgot that truth, I didn't raise my voice. I didn't panic. I didn't let it slide. She looked around the room, made sure they heard it, not just with their ears, but with their future selves. I documented it, I filed it, I showed up, and I told the truth. A long breath passed. Some in the room sat back in their chairs, quieter than before. That officer thought his badge made him untouchable, until he saw my rank. She tapped her chest once. Not just here, but here, she said, pointing to her spine, her stance, her stillness. That's leadership. She closed her folder. Not for applause, not for validation, but because the work was done. And somewhere outside, wind moved gently through the flag on the base yard. It didn't flap wildly, it didn't shout, it just stood, like her. Because some victories don't need noise, they just need to last.